Okay, how can we contribute to a better, more just society?
How can we how can we as individuals contribute toward a better, more just society? A society is composed of individuals. So how can we become better, more just individuals? We would say that as individuals, we are divine by nature. The source of our being is divinity. That divinity is the essence, really the quintessence of truth, righteousness, love, and peace. Our nature. So our nature is to be just. Our nature is to be better. We're in a fallen condition, more or less, to different degrees. But how can we become a better, more just people? We start from the premise that having been a divine entity, a divine being that has fallen into pollution because of our identifying as being a material body. Because of identification with the material body, we want what? Gratification of the senses of the body. The senses being the eyes, the nose, tongue, belly, and genitals. So how can we clean up the pollution of our consciousness? Because as long as our consciousness is contaminated, of course our thoughts, our feeling, our willing will be contaminated. And so what's contaminated? Lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. As long as we are identifying with that material body, well, we're going to be what? If we have lust, we're going to be what? Greedy, have anger. All that springs from lust, identifying with the material body. So the first step toward having a more just and better society is to come out of the material identification, identifying as being a material body, because we're spiritual beings. Most of us in our ignorance are identifying as being the body. But when we look closer, we'll see that we are the watcher, the knower of the body. We're spirit. We are spiritual beings. We don't have any real identification with that body as the self. If we look closer, we can see that there's a seer here. There's one who sees the body. If I can see it, I'm not it. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it. So what is looking at this body, this whole thing is spirit, intelligence. That's the nature of spirit, pure intelligence. So the idea is to come back to identifying as the spirit, the spiritual being. And the more we identify as a spirit and live as a spirit, the less we are exploited and colonized by lust, anger. And we say colonization now because a lot of us think the enemy is outside, but the enemy is within our own consciousness. That lust will enslave us. Anger will intoxicate and enslave us, just as lust will. Greed will intoxicate and enslave us. So these kind of things make us selfish, right? Unrighteous, lack of compassion. That's identification with the material body. So we say to come back, identify as a spiritual being. Identify as being spirit, free from all designations. No race, no creed, no color, no nationality, no caste, no class, no kind of material identification. No gender, which is causing a lot of problems nowadays. We're trying to get identified as being a material body, but we're not the body. This is why we can't get any real satisfaction out of the body. No matter how much we get to a certain point where it's just there's no fulfillment there. So when we start back identifying, turn within, go within, start seeing the self from within. See the self as the knower of the body. The more we look within, see the self from within, and identify as the spirit within. And then we see the spirit within everyone. And so this way we say, see and serve this supreme being in everyone. Gradually we see there's now not all these different bodies and things. There's only that supreme being looking out through everybody. So the more we can see and serve the supreme being and wake up, to awaken, the more we awaken, the more we are free from anger, lust, greed, illusion, madness, and envy that causes all this selfishness, that causes us to be a decadent or unjust society. So it starts with the individual. So this spiritual practice is a spiritual advancement for the individual's very foundation. We change the very foundation of our knowledge of what we are, of who we really are. We're not the body with the soul, we're the soul with the body. The soul is eternal, full of unlimited knowledge and bliss, and beyond. Come back to the real knowledge of the self as spirit, as pure intelligence. And this is a way that we can transcend, purify, and go beyond a decadent society to a better society, from an unjust society to a just and honorable society.
What can we do to get back to that state, get to that awakening?
Number one, the very first thing we need to do is really see the self as spirit. Change the way we look at the self. When we change the way we look at the self, we change the way we look at the world. And when we change the way we look at the world, we change the way our interaction with the world is. So if we start interacting with the world as spirit, it begins to change the way we interact with others in the world. So we see spirit is pervading and transcending my body. Spirit is pervading and transcending everybody that we can see with these external eyes. And then we say, see the self differently, see the self as spirit or pure energy, frequency, vibration, even a knower of energy, frequency, vibration, and our supreme being as a source of all energy, frequency, and vibration. So we say, see the self as spirit, chant the holy name, whatever holy name you have. If you're a Muslim, you might chant the holy name Allah. If you're a Christian, if you think that your supreme being, the name is Christ or Jesus, and that name represents that which is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, call out that name all the time and try and find out as much as you can about what you believe about your supreme being or God, whatever name you have. But find out as much as you can from your own study, your own research, your observation, and your own experience. Find out as much as you can about your supreme being. Call out the name all the time, as much as you possibly can. Call out the holy name. This gives us association and appreciation for our own supreme being. And then, as you do that, offer everything. Offer everything, all that you think, feel, will, and do that as an offering to your supreme being. And in doing that, this enables us to always think about our supreme being. This spiritual practice revolves around always thinking about our supreme being. So we gather knowledge about what you consider your supreme being is right now, keeping our mind open, staying open so that we can continue to learn. Stay open, continue to learn everything that we can about our own supreme being. Call out the name, offer everything. Do everything as an offering. So we say offering, surrender, submission, offering, surrender, submission, service. They're synonymous. They mean the same thing. But this allows us to always think about our supreme being. And since our supreme being is undifferentiated, supreme, absolute existence, this means that it is the same. So this gives us association with the most pure one. Our supreme being is the most just one, the always ever better one. So the more we associate with our supreme being, the more we're purifying our existence, purifying our consciousness of lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy, the quote-unquote demons, if you will, that keeps us in a hellish existence. Because as long as our consciousness is polluted, the more we're going to do negative things, destructive things to others, and actually it eventually comes back around to us. So we suffer because of our own doing. So we want to always think about our supreme being, cleanse our consciousness so that our very consciousness is cleaner. The more the consciousness is clean, the more our thoughts are clean. The more the thoughts are clean, the more the feelings are clean. The more the feelings are clean, the more the doings are clean. And the more the doings, since we reap what we sow, the more the doings are clean, the less we suffer. We become better people, a better and more just individual. The more the just individuals are increased, the more our society is just and better all the time for all sentient beings.
To help maintain that state, do you recommend like constant meditation throughout the day?
Well, meditation is part of our spiritual practice. Well, our spiritual practice is like, according to the terrain we're on, just like a 18-wheeler, a tractor trailer truck driver. According to the terrain, they change gear. So we have various gears. We can call them, quote unquote, gears in our spiritual practice. We say prayer, study, and our prayer doesn't consist of asking our Supreme Being to do this and do that and all the other. Our Supreme Being is not our order supplier. Our business is to be servants of our Supreme Being. Serve our Supreme Being first. Serve God first, and through serving God, we become better servants of others. When we water the root of the tree, the whole tree is nourished. We wouldn't have to try and water every leaf, every twig, every flower on the tree, but simply by watering the root of the tree, simply by putting water at the root of the tree, the whole tree is nourished. So we say learn how to serve God first. So our constant praise and thanksgiving. When we wake up in the morning, start praising and being thankful. Attitude of gratitude. Be thankful, and we see our blessing in the middle of what could be the stressing. So that's constant praise and thanksgiving. Prayer. Thanking God for our leadership, for leading us. Studying about our Supreme Being. Serving our Supreme Being. Associating, we call it Sangha, but associating with those who are trying to get closer to our Supreme Being, who are trying to flow with the harmony of our Supreme Being. And meditation. Meditation is a crucial part. Meditation can be more and more beautiful all the time. And when we meditate, we can start out by calling the holy name. One can watch the breathing process. One can watch the rising and falling of the chest. And at a certain point, one can meditate on silence itself. Listen to the silence just like you listen to jazz or listen to different kinds of music at one time in your life, or even now. But listen to the sound of silence. And when the consciousness tries to entertain other thoughts, you bring it back to silence. Just like if you're using a mantra, calling out the name, you're using that mantra to stay focused on Supreme Reality, Supreme Being. And so when the consciousness tries to entertain other thoughts, you bring it back to your object of meditation. So we have thinking, concentrating, and meditation. Thinking thoughts can come from all different directions, but when you concentrate, you're focused on one particular thought. But when you get into meditation, you're transcending thought to the parts where there are no thoughts. When we meditate on silence itself, you see there are no thoughts in silence. You sit there, and that's purifying. We're meditating on that which is indivisible, undifferentiated, supreme, absolute existence. And this purifies our consciousness. The more the consciousness is purified, becomes still and quiet again, then there are only edifying thoughts within it. The more any kind of thoughts that come into the consciousness to edify. But we want to get it to the point where the consciousness is pure, quiet, and still again. And from that quietness, you start entering your supreme nature again. We start awakening, continue to awake into our supreme nature. Sometimes one can compare the process of coming into a theater before the movie begins. And you sit there, and the screen is, there's nothing on the screen yet. But there are sounds, and the silence is like unto the music, soft music playing in the theater before the movie begins. But at a certain point, it starts lighting up inside. The movie begins. You start experiencing what we've been reading about. So it's one thing to read about it and talk about it, but we have to have what? Knowledge, observation, experience, and reflection to know that we know what we know. And the more we know that we know what we know and get this experience of it, the more we can be more enthusiastic about our spiritual practice. The more we're enthusiastic about our spiritual practice, of course, the more we engage in it. And having these, what is it, 8 of them? Prayer, study, sacrifice, service, right, association, meditation. We can always be engaged in some form of spiritual practice, some kind of spiritual practice all day long. Whether we're in the supermarket, waiting in line for the cashier to get to us, or whether we're driving the car, or whether we're walking in the woods, whatever we're doing, we can stay always thinking about our Supreme Being. This whole spiritual practice revolves around always thinking about our Supreme Being. And this is the purification process.
Speak on quieting your thoughts and getting your thoughts, all that
Yeah, so
confusion out of you.
if the thoughts are not anchored in, if we're not anchored in, if we don't have a center point that we can anchor into, the thoughts, because of the quality of the consciousness, the thoughts can come in there, any kind of thoughts can come in, and they're further polluted by the consciousness. So when we engage in focusing on our Supreme Being, focusing on God, our Supreme Being,
That's your center point.
that's our center point. It's like we have a compass. You know, the compass have the pick on the end. If you put that in that one point, then you can draw circles of various degrees. You have a center point. To have any kind of harmony, we have to have a common center point. So the more perfect our center point is, the more perfect our harmony is. The more perfect we are, the more we have a more perfect center point. The more perfect our center point is, the more perfect our unity is. So to have a more united society, have a point that we can agree is our common center point. So we say no matter what name we have for Supreme Being, as long as we can agree that our Supreme Being is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, eternally, then whatever the name is, we can still agree. And we have a common center point. If that, we don't know that center point is indivisible, undifferentiated, supreme, absolute existence, we have seemingly the most perfect center point. And some of us experience the fact that this is the most perfect center point. And we can have that unity that we're striving for, a more perfect unity, a more perfect union. But as long as we don't have a common center point, if that center point is imperfect, of course, we have an imperfect union. As long as we think that we're individual material bodies, that we come from different clans and tribes and sects and creeds and color and etc., we're disunited. If we think that our spiritual practice is more advanced than anyone else's, or our God is better than someone else's God, then we have what? We have friction. But we can agree that no matter what name we have for Supreme Being, we can agree that it is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, it's indivisible, undifferentiated, supreme, absolute existence, pervading and transcending everybody, the grass, the trees, the birds, the bees, all sentient beings, then we can move toward that common center point and move toward a more perfect, more just, more honorable, a better society for all sentient beings. We are spiritual beings. We really already transcend the material body. The more we can relate as being this transcendental being, this spirit that pervades and transcends this body, the more we can relate to that transcendental being in everyone else. See? The more we can relate to that sameness within this particular body is the sameness with the other body. No matter what the body may look like. It might look like a tree. It may look like a flea. It might look like a deer. The body would. But that which pervades and transcends the body is the real self. This self is smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest simultaneously. It is that pure intelligence at the very foundation of the intelligence of all sentient beings. It pervades and transcends the body. We say that it pervades and transcends every molecule. It pervades and transcends every atom. It pervades and transcends every proton, neutron, electron. It pervades and transcends the quarks. It's more subtle than the ether. Of course, we know the ether is more subtle than the air. The air is more subtle than the water. The water is more subtle than the earth. So this supreme intelligence pervades and transcends every space that's between the subatomic particles. At the same time, it witnesses the comings and goings of the cosmic manifestation. So this source of all intelligence is what we mean by supreme being. This is what we mean by God, our supreme being that's been long forgotten, but gradually coming back into vision now. But this is our supreme being, the supreme being that we knew before the rise of Egypt, that we knew before the rise of the Punt, this supreme being that we knew when we were doing well on the planet. But since we've forgotten, been turned away from our supreme being, we've been in misery. Because not seeing our supreme being in each other, we've been divided. We've been divided because of race, creed, color, nationality, gender, species of life. But when we can see that sameness within others as we see within ourselves, when we can actually experience this, and this spiritual practice allows us to experience this. The more we experience this supreme being within ourselves and act accordingly, the more we have a greater unity with each other. With each individual making up a city, a state, a union, a nation, the more we have what? A more perfect nation, a better nation for everyone, not just human beings. Because this supreme being pervades and transcends every living being. So as we've done to the least of this any living being, we've done it to our supreme being, who pervades and transcends every living being here. This is why it's living. This is why it has life. This is why it has frequency, energy, vibration, because of the presence of the source of all energy, frequency, vibration, who we consider to be God Almighty.